Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Just a Recording Podcast. I am your host, Patrick Moen, and thank you so much for tuning in with us today. This week's episode is with Mr. John Kornegay, a gentleman who I had met through the Raleigh Raw community and has just really made an impact not only on me, but my professional life, has really helped me just push the boundaries of my thought processes, and things that I thought might have been normal aren't anymore. So my hat goes off to this gentleman. John has really been in this neighborhood of Raleigh, North Carolina, since going to college at Shaw University, and his story is just spectacular and what he's been able to accomplish. First and foremost, this gentleman is an amazing father and a husband. And so in this episode, we talk a lot about his relationship with Santana, his wife, being a father, growing up with an absent father, that somebody that, got taken away from him very early. And so you're really going to open up, and we're going to pluck a little bit at your heartstrings in this episode. But I think you're going to learn a little bit, maybe not only about yourself, but how to show up in your relationship, if maybe that's something that you're working towards or working on, or maybe you've just found yourself in a relationship that might be a little stale. John and his wife are really kind of paving the way of this new genre that is within the confines of their relationship. And so I'm really excited to bring this episode to you today. Before we go ahead and get into the episode, I'd love for you to go and check out my website at maverickbusinesselevation.com. I am a business coach, and your referral would mean the world to me. What I do is I help really turn businesses around. I help them strategize on how to grow, how to appropriately hit that growth, and just work in any kind of industry. So if you know somebody that might be struggling, maybe they just have all the successes in the world, but they want another leg up, I am your guy, so I would love to hear from you. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it, fam. Peace. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Just a Recording Podcast. Obviously, I'm your host, Patrick. And this week we have, how do I, the many accolade-wearing entrepreneur, fashion aficionado, somebody that's really helped me expand my mind a lot on relationships. Somebody who I met very, very early on when I moved here to Raleigh, and he has done an incredible job of just forging an incredible relationship, and it's just been really fun to see how it's blossomed since moving here, and all the things. We are in book club together, who you host. We do the Raleigh Run Club, which is now the Raleigh Athletic Club, which you partially host. We go to Conscious Conversations together. We're usually always playing around at Raleigh Raw, and then you shoot a lot of my photography. And so I'd love to introduce John Kornegay. So go ahead and say what's up.
What's up, everyone? Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be now having a sit-down conversation with you, and so we can kind of really get to it. I actually was excited about this.
Yeah.
Because it's been a while since I've podcasted, and I've been listening to some other podcasts here and there, along with you. Hearing what you all been talking about.
Right.
That's why when I hit you with what we talking about, you're like, hey, I was like, oh, okay. So
it's funny when people ask, they're just like, so what kind of prep you want me to do? And I mentioned this to you. I'm like, no prep.
Yeah.
Nothing.
So it's like,
I don't do any prep, and I don't want you to do any prep, because I really want the conversation to just have this organic beauty to it. And so it really allows us to not have any predetermined notions of what it is that we're going to talk about, right. Which things might come out that are really great and really kind of push the boundaries on my thought process and probably on yours.
Iron sharpens iron.
It does. So let's dive in. Is this your first podcast that you've been on?
No, this isn't the first I've been on.
Yeah.
So I've done a couple before. I have a friend of mine who I was actually a part of the podcast in that regard. So I was a staple of it. We kind of dropped the ball on it. Just the lining up schedules, being married, having a child, giving enough time and space for my wife to do the things that she wants to do. It became cumbersome. So it was like we've talked about it, hey, we got to get back to it.
Right.
So eventually we probably will. But it was one of those things where I was the support to his lead in that regard. So
got it.
And then Greg and I, we have this thing where we want to possibly do some potting as well.
All right. Cool. So let's kind of dive in a little bit because I think we have a lot to unpack. I see that you're wearing the burgundy cap today. You switched it up on them. Yeah, I like it.
Shout out to Ariel, my homie from Knittings and Things. Give her a quick little pub in there. I feel like I put on my IG too. I was talking about the podcast. I was like, what should I talk about?
I was just going to bring that up.
She hit me with the, tell them they need the Marvin Gaye beanie. So I'm like, oh, okay. I'm gonna tell her, they just need to go ahead and just change it. Call it the JK beanie, and so we can kind of get it out there more. So.
Did you post all of them that people hit you with, or were there some that were?
No, everybody who hit me with something, I put it out there, or they either had a little joke to it as well. So actually, Ebony, she's in our book club as well. She was the one who talked about Melissa Ford. So she and I have like a back conversation about Melissa Ford and how I think she's a patron saint. And she's like, yeah, whatever. So,
cool. So let's get into a little bit about your story, and then we can really start to unpack your journey since you've kind of been here in Raleigh. Are you from Raleigh?
No, originally from Detroit, Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you born and raised?
No, actually. So I get a little celebratory shout out to the Kansas City Chiefs because I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, lived there until I was 5, and then went to Detroit and grew up in Detroit in that regard. So,
okay.
So yeah.
And so did you live with both your parents in Detroit?
No, so my mother and father were married and they divorced by the time I was 2.
Okay.
But roots from both sides of the family are from Detroit. So mother and father grew up like literally around the block from each other. And so grandparents and the fixtures of the community in terms of my family were all right there. So
right.
When we came back, it was just a simple, seamless integration into getting to know family and things like that. So
and everyone stayed in Detroit after they separated. So you knew nothing other than just I don't think you remembered any any separation or
no By the time they were separated, I was already I was of 2. So
how long did you stay in Detroit for?
Until 2003 when I graduated high school. Then I came down here to North Carolina.
Why'd you come here?
Basketball. I'm a student athlete, so I played basketball at Shaw University. But the basketball scholarship was what brought me down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You had a scholarship for basketball.
Yeah. I'm not too bad for I can play a little bit for real.
I know you go hard in the paint.
Yeah, I can play for real. My education was paid for.
That's why I don't play with you because you go hard in the paint.
So that's what brought me down here. But father's side of the family actually has ties in North Carolina. So my father's side is actually from the Goldsboro, Mount Olive area. Mm-hmm. So the transition from Midwest to the South was seamless in that regard. Plus, my godfather and my godparents actually. So when my father passed away in '96, my mom pushed me into sports, and then basketball was the one that stuck. So I would go to the YMCA. And there was a young couple at the time. They were 28, and so my godmother was a few years older than my godfather. But she pretty much after a summer of me spending so much time with them, like my Saturdays, Sundays was always at the gym. She basically was like, "Hey, if anything was ever to happen to me, would you take care of my son?" And they took that with like open arms. And so when I came down here for school, my godfather got a job at Winston-Salem State. So it was like in Winston-Salem. So I had connections. So my transition from the Midwest to the South was seamless in that regard.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. And you're what, 19, 20? When you moved down here to go, because you went to, it was college.
Yeah. So it
was Shaw University. You said, yep.
Yeah. So I have that late birthday. So I was 17. So I have a very funny. My first couple of weeks here, being a college student, being grown but not grown. We had a little club here. I don't think the name was like Caracos or something like that. It was actually like right down the street here. They say you can get in with a college ID. It's college night. So I try to go in with the club, and I show my ID. They're like, no, we need to see your state ID. So I pull out my Michigan license, and I'm 17. So like, you can't come in here. So I was so upset because there's false advertisement. I'm not going to the club for the full year. So I just sat out every time if it wasn't a house party, if it wasn't on campus, I didn't go.
You stuck it to him.
Stuck it to him. I was like, you're not getting my $5. No, you're not.
You know who probably suffered?
100%.
Yeah. I wasn't social for a whole year.
Well, I did not say that. I just didn't go off campus, or I didn't do any. Yeah, I didn't.
You didn't do any clubbing.
Didn't do any clubbing. So.
Okay. How'd you like going to college here?
Oh, I loved it.
What year? What years was it?
So I did the 2003 to 2008. So I had a nice little. I redshirted from an athletic perspective. I had a redshirt year. So for my playing career, it was 2004 to 2008. But yeah, that full 5 years I had in college was fantastic.
Yeah.
Even though my views on education has changed immensely since being in education and then working in education for 6 years. I now have a different view on education, but I feel as if the experience to go and meet various people in college, that's something that you can't take away from that experience. Is something you need to do that. Anybody. So
yeah, I have a hard time when the argument comes up of if somebody should go to college or not, and I think it's individually college was incredible for me. It really helped me kind of come into my own. It helped me really develop a lot of social skills. Yeah. It completely changed my perspective on culture. I was raised in basically a predominantly white neighborhood. Yeah. There was one half black kid that lived there, and everyone picked on him. Right. It was like horrible when I look back on it now. So when I went to college in South Florida, I just was completely overwhelmed with culture, and it changed my life. And it made me a better person, and it made me who I am today. And so, but I do think that some individuals could probably skip out on college, and maybe not have to go because they've lived in many different areas. They are a little bit more culture. They have a better sense about them. I think it kind of depends.
I feel the same way. It's a mixed bag. My experience, so Detroit, growing up in Detroit at the time was very segregated. So I didn't see white kids until it was a game that we had to play. And we played in the suburbs. And so when I got down here, because again, I said I was a YMCA kid, first job I knew of summertime, there was a YMCA right down the road. At the time, it was the Alexander YMCA, the one right by State. So I just knew, I got a job there 100%. I knew the YMCA mission statement through and through. Like I've been there for so long. So got the job, obviously. The staff doesn't look a lot like me, which is I'm okay with that. I'm cool with it. But I didn't realize how much of the social angst I had because I hadn't been around a lot of white people until my very first day after orientation. It's about 8:00, and they're like, "Hey, you need a ride home?" I'm like, "No, I'm good. I'll just catch the bus." And I'm not thinking about it because Raleigh is not Detroit, and Detroit's a metropolitan area, so Detroit the buses run. So I'm not transportation. I'm not thinking of it from that perspective. I'm thinking I've seen the buses. Yeah. I can get on the bus and go home. No. So the bus stopped running. So I walked from Hillsborough, and I lived on, I'm in college. So I lived on Trailwood and Lineberry. I think that's the streets. So it's basically walk all the way towards Mission, the NC State area where Avett Ferry is, and I had to walk all the way down, then up a hill and around. So I'm telling you a very long story because the next day, my friend Brett Frenier, he was from Chicago. His family was originally from Chicago, and he was like, "Hey, if you need a ride, just let me know." And I was like, "Hey, I had no idea that the buses didn't run." He was like, "Yeah, I kind of figured that." He's like, "Yeah." So he was like, "No big deal." And then from there, that was the understanding and unpacking the whatever social norms that we had from our own cultures, and we started. That was my introduction to shopping or getting myself ingratiated with Caucasian or white culture in that regard.
Yeah.
So but our bindings was actually sports, hip hop, and all those things. So
is Shaw a predominantly black college?
HBCU,
yeah.
Oldest HBCU in the South. So if you
what's HB
historically black. college and university.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So,
did you have a full ride for basketball?
full ride.
Wow.
And then I want to say my junior and senior year, I decided I wanted to be a little extra with my athletic endeavors, and I decided to run track and cross country as well. So I was a 3-sport athlete in school.
I saw how happy you just got. Yeah. You're like, the camera caught it.
3-sport athlete. Yeah, just want to throw that out there.
What'd you study in school?
Computer information systems.
Got it. So, what'd you hope to do, or what did you want to be when you graduated?
I wanted to work for Epic Games. I wanted to be what Fortnite is. I wanted to work on stuff for like Fortnite, Gears of War.
Epic Games then was so small.
Mm-hmm. But they had Gears of War.
Yeah.
Gears of War was their IP at the time. So I
forgot that they had Gears of War. That was one of the first.
That was one of the first ones.
Yeah, one of my first games that I got in the first player. I don't know what it's called.
But yeah, that was my goal. And then I took one sociology class, and I was like, damn. Can we cuss on this podcast?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Just, but I was like, I should
just say fuck.
I wanted to say fuck.
Yeah.
But I just, I didn't know where.
Yeah.
But no, I wanted to
get it out the way.
Get it out the way. Yeah. I after taking one sociology class, I was like, damn, I think I picked the wrong major. But if I would go back in hindsight, I'd probably do mass comm. So.
Say that again.
Mass communication.
Okay. Mass communication.
Yeah.
Okay. So you graduated in 2008.
Graduated 2008.
And then what?
Got a job at Best Buy to hold me over, and then I got a job at a nonprofit credit counseling agency. So we were trying to get people out of debt. I would not name the name of the establishment because it's still here. There's still a viable business here, but it was a little interesting. So I quit that job. It was one of those jobs where I had it, I quit it. I quit it because I had a supervisor. She was very snarky. And then she only made 50 cents more than me. And I'm like, I'm not going to let you just talk to me in this manner. Typical millennial stuff, too. I was into my post-college. I feel like I should have everything in that regard, too. So it was like, you only make 50 cents more than me. I put some feelers out there, took an interview. I quit the day I had the interview, I quit. I just literally just went back to my job, got some whey protein, and walked out. Never came back. I was a little brash, dude.
Yeah.
So, but I did get that job that I did interview for. So.
Yeah. All right. Were you living with friends here, or?
Yeah. So I after college. I guess we skipped some stuff too. I guess so. I had to double back. So in college, my college experience was a bit interesting, and this will actually play. This definitely will probably play later in terms of the conversation.
Get it.
So in my whole time in college, I was pretty much in a stable relationship, and so once about our senior year, we end up a young lady and I, we ended up breaking up. So then my buddy Anthony and I was living with another friend of mine named Anthony at the time, so it was the three of us. And then once we graduated, Anthony and I then moved, I guess northeast Raleigh, up Capitol, around that way by Wake Tech's Northern Campus. So over in that area, we stayed to each other for about maybe 2 or 3 years, and then I did the solo thing, and then Santana came in town, and the next thing you know, boom. So
you met her when you were in college?
No, Santana and I have known each other since we were 16. So we went to high school together. No sweetheart type thing, by no means, but yeah, we've known each other for a while. Yeah.
How'd you know she moved to town?
Well, I invited her. So the story with Santana, if you ever have a conversation with her, she'll tell you she came to visit me. She came to visit me for a summer and just never left. And that's true though. She was only supposed to be here for the summer, and she just decided to stay.
Yeah. Were you guys like homies or?
So Santana and I was in high school. I was more. I was closer to her friend, her best friend now, in terms of like rapport and relationship, because her friend's more outgoing. So Santana was more of she had her own vibe to her. She was just a little, not standoffish, but she had her own vibe. She did her own thing. Even though we should have had like more dealings because she was on the cheerleading team. But then she was like, she's like, yeah, I knew you played basketball, but she wasn't really into me in that regard, which is 100% cool. Well, I mean, we can dive into that later, obviously. Well, we can get into it now because Santana, her her attraction is women. So she wasn't checking for me because she was liking the ladies. So she wasn't really, feeling me in that regard. So, but like when we end up, it's funny stories. So my best friend took her to prom. And so it's me, my prom date, and my best friend Brandon and Santana were all sitting there at the table. But me and Santana are like matching, like to it. Like we look like we could have been the prom dates. And then my best friend and my date looked like they could have been a matching like couple in that regard. Because that's how we did it in Detroit. Usually is like we try to match. Of course, like we would ask, "What's your accent color?"
We did the same.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
It was just ironic. Like she wore lavender and cream. No, she wore all lavender. I wore lavender and cream. Whereas my best friend and my date, they both just had on cream. He had a cream suit on. She had a cream dress on. Yeah. Wow.
You remember the colors?
My memory's pretty nice. So I remember it. I remember that.
Yeah.
So.
Huh. And so that was prom.
2003.
Yeah, and then you came down here, still kept in touch.
Good old,
Yeah.
Mark and good old Facebook.
Yeah.
So she stayed in Michigan. She went to school from Michigan, and then she decided to go to the Navy because her parents were giving her a little bit of some flack in terms of like supporting her through college because of her lifestyle, because she was gay. Is gay.
Yeah.
So she said, she had to take matters in her own hands. She enlisted into the Navy, and so then that takes her all across the world. But I'm able to see we're still able to keep up just because of good old Zuck.
Yeah.
And Facebook. So
it's funny how it's not funny, but I picked up on how when you were talking about how you changed that she is.
Yes. I'm very conscious to speak, authenticity in that regard. So
sure.
She and I have always had this conversation, but I don't want to ever misconstrue or misrepresent who she is. In that regard. And that was one of the things. Like even when I was courting or pursuing her, it was the same thing. Like I never asked you to change who you were. I knew who you were before. Obviously, me getting myself in this mode to be like pursue you in this regard. So
right.
I knew what the barrier of entry was, so to speak. So she is who she is.
What was the draw?
Santana. She's an amazing. Like, I don't do a well enough job of actually telling her, and I know that because of my own. It's funny, like yesterday at the conscious conversations, it's kind of the thing where. The example of talking to the small 4-year-old for Sharif or the 8-year-old for the young lady who gave representation. So me, it's the small 12-year-old who's heard certain things, who's not used to certain what would you call compliments or anything of like words of affirmation or encouragement. So for me, it's like I don't do a well enough job of giving the words of affirmation to Santana to her face in that regard. Whereas I'm trying to get better at it, and it's something I know I have to work at. But for me, I don't think of it from that perspective. I'm just like, I know she's great. She should know she's great too. And I explained it to her, but then she explained it to me, and I'm like, all right, I'm conscious of it. Let me work at it. Let me now find my opportunities to do better and say, hey, you're doing a good job with this, or you're doing a good job with that, but making it unique and not just saying it like for the sake of saying, you did this today, and this is so good because it benefits me. It's actually pointing out how great she is.
Yeah.
But to go back to her, Santana's again, she's a lively person. What the main thing from her is just like how we sat down in 2013. So how we came about, one of my good friends, her brother plays for the LA Chargers. And so she lived out, she went from over here, moved out there with him to just make sure everything's going on. And she, still worked at Best Buy because I still had my Best Buy ties around this time. And flying out to San Diego, because they were still in San Diego, I knew Santana was out there because she was living in San Diego. So I was in her DM, hit her up. I said, hey, let's just do lunch. And she was like, well, can't do lunch because I'm working. So let's get dinner. And then we end up meeting at a restaurant, and we went to dinner. And that conversation was like 5 hours. And we were just going back and forth. And it was like natural. And it was like, I'm like, oh, this is this is something. There's more to this than this. So like, as much as I like, I'm very confident in who I am as a person, but I'm like, there's real connection between she and I when in this moment we're having a conversation. So it's like, I think there's more to it. And, she was resisting me at first, but it was one of those things where it was like, she not let in, but she kind of like let her guard down and actually took me for me and not because of the gender of who I was, because that was a struggle for her in that regard. She's like, I'm not supposed to like him. He's a guy and all that jazz. So, and we had that conversation about it as well too. So it was interesting. But I'm also skipping out the point that what gave me a sense to shoot my shot per se was that, and this, as trivial as this may sound. So at this point in time, I'm working in higher education. So higher education, John, is suit and tie all the time. So I'm always wingtips and monk strap shoes, nice socks, tie, everything. I'm that guy.
Yeah.
So she would make a point to like comment on my pictures, like, or even like just shout out, like she'd take a picture of her shoe. So I used to always take the down angle shoe image and be like kicks of the day. So she took one picture like that and was like, I'm getting my John Kornegay on. So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, because I'm also the Virgo in me is very analytical and pattern driven. She doesn't do that with everybody on social media. Like you can literally leave a comment. She may she may like it. She may comment back. But the fact that she's giving me this energy from 3 hours, 3 hours from now, or since like, so she, obviously I'm up before her because I'm 3 hours ahead of her, and she's giving me this energy. And as she started her day, I'm like, oh, something's here. Let me go back and try to see, let me go back. And then next thing you know, I'm like, all right, well, now I have your attention. This is what I'm about.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was all that.
All right, so let's. There's a couple points that I want to touch on. You mentioned words of affirmation. Mm-hmm. So what's your love language?
My love language is actually time spent. So
that's what you speak.
That's what I.
So is that what you receive?
I receive. Yes, I receive. I receive time spent. So time spent for me is like that's my
quality time.
Yeah, quality time.
Okay. What do you speak?
I think I would speak.
We know it's not words of affirmation.
It's not words of affirmation.
So that's 4 other.
Yeah, it's not words of affirmation. I don't know, because I think I might be biased on it in terms of like I'd be interested to hear what like Santana says or somebody else who I engage with in that aspect.
Yeah.
But I do think I'm more action oriented. Like it's not me saying I love you. I show you I love you.
Yeah.
So.
Acts of service.
Yeah. So it could be. I would probably acts of service.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Acts of service is my love language that I speak, but physical touch and words of affirmation is what I receive.
Yeah.
That book changed my perspective on everything. And so when you brought that up about how you don't do a good enough job of telling Santana to her, but every time I hear you talk about her, you paint this picture. I've never met Santana, but I envision this like gorgeous goddess of a woman that's the mother of your child that is just so incredible that you were able to marry and create this beautiful life with. Right. And so it's funny to hear that you are working on trying to do a better job of telling her that.
Right. So yeah, I have to be better at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So.
And then the other point that I wanted to touch on. So Santana consciously had to make the decision to stop being gay, a lesbian, to date you. How long did you guys date for? And how difficult was that transition? Because I gotta imagine that's like, I don't want to equate it to something as severe as like, like the churches where they try and like make the children not be gay. It's like, Christian camp, and they send gay kids there to, whiteboard them, but I'm sure it was a difficult process for you to experience and then for her to probably go through. Was it or was it not?
So I would say it's more of a Santana question, and the reason why I would say that is because the struggle, if it was, it's an internal struggle with her.
Yeah.
So in that regard, it was never.
Did you feel it?
It was never externally shown to me until probably a little later.
Right.
But then that's when we start figuring out that she's dealing with depression. But then the depression precedes me. Mm-hmm. So it was when it was these things, and then that's when we're starting to figure out that these are the things that she was feeling. She was feeling inauthentic, but it wasn't me per se. It was the pressure that she felt towards other people.
Like social acceptance.
The social acceptance in that regard.
Right.
So it's kind of like how in conscious conversation, we talked about the wounded female or the wounded feminine.
Yeah.
And how the people pleaser and all that jazz.
Yeah.
That's possibly what she's now getting over in that regard.
So we definitely jumped into some several different areas that are very. So I guess for the listeners to kind of really unpack this is that Santana and you were childhood friends. Mm-hmm. She was a lesbian. You guys kept in touch. She came to visit you, and you guys basically fell in love. And she decided to stop being a lesbian, and well, not stop, but she put it on hold, I think is the appropriate thing to say after what's happening now, which we can get into in a little bit. But she kind of put it aside because she felt something for you.
Right.
And so you guys started dating. So how long did you guys date for?
Oh, see, that's the thing. It's a sprint. So we went from, so let's say I flew out there February 2014 for Valentine's Day weekend. Fan. We had a little dinner on the beach, that type of jazz.
Yeah. All right.
We spent the whole weekend. By the time I leave, we are a couple. From there, we distance date until about April, May. Then she comes here.
From February until April, May.
Yeah.
And how long the distance was from here to Detroit?
No, so it was San Diego here. Then San Diego, then she moves back to Detroit for a brief couple of months, and then she comes down here.
Yeah.
And then from there, we've been together since.
How difficult was it for you to handle the long distance when she was San Diego?
It was tough from a perspective of again being that I would want her here, but it was one of those things where it's like this Google Hangout situation, because again I'm an Android user, she's an iOS user, so it was like we were just gonna tap into this Google Hangouts. FaceTime wasn't really rocking with FaceTime like that. Still not, no big deal. But we just Google hung out until one of us fell asleep on the phone or
yeah. So yeah, I had to do long distance too from Florida to LA with my ex-wife, and it's the 3-hour time change, the distance. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a 5-6 hour plane ride. Yeah. I mean, you lose half a full day when you fly there. Mm-hmm. So,
we only had one of those, and that was me.
Yeah. So I did it for a year and a half. Yeah, so I had.
Yeah.
I was in.
Yeah. So, in that one flight, and then after that, she was back on Eastern time zone. So when she came back to Detroit, that was easier because we're on the same time frame.
Right.
And then obviously, should I need to come back home to Detroit, I can because I'm from there. It's
right.
not a big deal. But then she ends up coming down to North Carolina, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So how long did you guys date before you married?
So we dated so technically we had that whole year. No, not even that. We were married by the 20th of 2015. Well, I'm sorry. February 20th, 2015 we're married. So a year.
Yeah.
But at that point, we'd had really honest conversations with each other in that regard. Like one of the things that I do appreciate about Santana is that I can be authentic in the sense of like in that time frame we were very authentic and raw and real with each other about what we wanted, and we put our ideas of what we wanted like very much in the forefront. So it was, my thing was, I intend on the next person I date, I intend on this being the last girlfriend I have because I will marry her. Like that was my intentions going into certain things.
Yeah.
Especially, so I was very intentional with that. And she had the same thing in the sense that she wanted to make sure the next relationship that she had was a long-lasting relationship. but I don't think that the card she thought that would be a guy. So
right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so she moves here. You guys move in together, and you guys start to create this beautiful life.
Mm-hmm.
So you're married how long until your son Langston is born?
We're married. So I find out we're expecting in November 2014. Yeah. So when we got married, that was a very early family photos. So these little small baby bump in there.
Wow.
And so then he's born in July.
Oh man.
So yeah, you can see that's why it adds more layers to the.
That is insane.
Adds more layers
just
to things.
Unpacking the fact that she now is, heterosexual in a heterosexual relationship, and pregnant. Mind blown.
Mm-hmm.
How was that? How was dealing with that? Was it tough or was it easy? Did it have challenges? I mean,
in what way?
I can imagine a woman who is identifying as a lesbian, as somebody who's gay, is now getting married to a guy, a childhood friend,
right.
A soulmate, a partner, and then they're pregnant with their child, like a child, like,
right.
I don't know, I guess I'm speaking from a sense of not really knowing, but I'm assuming that if you are born as a lesbian, that's who you are.
Who you are, yeah.
The thought of having a child grow inside you, I would assume is a far out thing to think about.
Right.
And so when it happens and it's like
the stair steps, that's what
it was like 1, 2, 3 within a year and a half.
Baby, postpartum, then it just kicks everything else off as well too. But no, to answer that, so it's a hard for me again in terms of that question and that perspective. That would be another Santana question.
Yeah.
For me, the process or the journey of her pregnancy was phenomenal. Like to watch her blossom into the.
Yeah, she's growing a human. I'm sure it's incredible.
Yeah, it was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Yeah, but in terms of that, again, that is something that she and I've talked about in terms of like the expedition of things in terms of like how fast her life changed. Like that was a culture shock for her in that regard.
Right.
So we talked about it, and it was one of those things where I have to empathize because on one aspect, what's jarring for her is what I've always envisioned. So it's me having to understand and give her the space to express. What again, it's kind of like you ride that roller coaster that's really fast and your stomach's way over here, then it finally catches up.
Right.
It's like when we're having some of these conversations, as we're unpacking the past, I should say, it is like she's explaining it from that perspective, and it's like, I 100% get that.
Yeah, but the universe delivered what you asked for.
Right.
It gave her something completely different.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure it's got to take a moment for you to sit back and to be able to, emphasize and, with her and what she probably went through, which probably could have, triggered the depression that you were talking about before.
Right.
Man, that's a lot. So now you guys have been in Raleigh for what, 10?
So we've been married. Again, the 20th of this month will be 5 years. So we've been married 5 years.
Yeah.
So
and then you've
together
been
6, married 5.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's just one of those things where but now we're getting at a pace now where we're starting to refortify because again, the depression was a struggle in that regard in terms of figuring if anyone who's either dealing with depression or has a significant other or a close family member that's dealing with depression, it's really nuanced, and you have to really, not the eggshells, but you've got to really be able to navigate that in that regard. And so for me, I'm a natural fixer. Like I show up to try to solve problems, and I know that that's not necessarily always the thing, and I can't necessarily do that.
Yeah.
Especially with something like depression. Like for me, it was I had to realize it took a while for me to not internalize her depression as something that is my fault. Like that was something I had to because at first because I'm very much looking at it like,
what did I do?
What did I
right?
What did I do? Or variables here. If we just do the math, I show up and then now you're depressed, and so like I had to, and it wasn't like I was doing that in the sense of like intentionally, but it was kind of one of those things where like I would start to maybe feel that way, or it was like so then she said it, but it was kind of like all right, but then I had to really think about it like nah, I still feel like she just saying that to say it, but no, it really wasn't about me in that regard, and so. Once it was about that, it was then I had to, allow her the space to figure some of the things out, in which she's doing a remarkable job doing that process now. So,
excuse me.
Yeah. So that was the part where the ebbs and flows, the vows of your marriage. That's where that's where it's really tested in along those lines. So. But our vows were kind of hokey and corny. So
obviously not. You guys have been together for
yeah. I mean, that's true. But we did have some corny vows. Like we wrote about like the trivial things that we did, like Xbox and bullshit.
Really?
Yeah. But no. Yeah.
Do you still play Xbox together?
Sure. Well, no. I mean, funny story. We were sitting at the house, and she was like, "Yo, did you know there's a new Mortal Kombat game?" I was like, "Yeah, Santana, I know." She said, "You don't have it?" If I don't know you wanted to play it, I would have bought it. So every now and then she'll surprise me with some randomness like that. So.
Yeah. And your son is how old?
4.
4.
Mm-hmm.
And how is the dynamic of having the 3 of you?
For me, it's one of those things where having a child made me realize how much shit I got to get rid of. And what I mean by that is that I refer back to the 12-year-old. So that inner 12-year-old, and 12 is a significant year for me. So obviously, we've, in referencing conscious conversations, how everybody's had that inner child that they had to deal with. For me, it's 12, and so like I needed to realize that 12-year-old that I probably has either experienced that trauma. I need to make sure that he's cool, because I don't want to pass anything from that 12-year-old child to the new child that we're now created, that me and Santana and I've created.
Yeah.
So that's that dynamic. It's one of those things where it's always challenging me to be the best version of myself, so I don't make another version of me, because I want him to have his own palette, he's his own thing. So it's the reason why that's why we didn't name him John. Like I don't want. You don't have no associations, no reason to try to live up to any standard by which that you feel is bestowed upon you because of you being my son. You're your own thing.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, you the Conscious Conversations 5 that we had yesterday, which was all about relationships, and some of the conversations, it's like there's a fine line between raising a child and wounding a child, right. Or like giving him too much space or not giving him enough space. Like no matter what, there's gonna be wounds, and you're gonna fuck your kid up a little.
But as long as I know that I have that this 12-year, I think yesterday reminded me, and it was one of those things that was like, I'm aware of my triggers from my 12-year-old, but it's the overt things. It's the ancillary things that kind of catch me off guard. And it was like, oh shit, that's that 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until they did the demonstration with Justin and his wife that was like, that's me and Santana. We literally had that conversation Saturday. Similar, but it was different. And I was like, holy shit, that's the 12-year-old.
Yeah.
So it was just like, all right. That's why I was like, I was thinking to myself, I said, all right, let me go ahead and get back to getting right. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and start find a therapist in that regard, because now I want to be conscious of the ancillary triggers, because I know the overt ones. I catch them and I know how to react to them, but it's the subtle ones that's like are starting to sneak up on me. I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
hold on. So that's why I want to get better with that one.
Yeah, same with me. This past year has been an incredible unpacking and like really recognizing what my wounds truly are. And a lot of it has stemmed from when my parents divorced.
Yeah.
This wound of abandonment, and it has completely like just continued to show itself. If you think about my father left, he was not in my life that much.
Yeah.
It was like if I was acting out, my mom called my dad. I got on the phone and I got yelled at.
Right.
And that was my impersonation of who he was. Losing a job, abandonment.
Yeah.
Losing my ex-wife, abandonment. Losing 2 friends to cancer, abandonment. So I have this crazy amount of fear of just entering into a relationship with somebody because I'm so fearful that they're going to leave.
Yeah.
And then there's this whole fear of, if I tell you who I truly am, you're going to leave me no matter what.
Right.
So that comes up with friends.
Yeah.
And so that yesterday really helped me recognize a lot of aspects of how I need to unpack that, because dating is tremendously difficult when you're wounded from abandonment and you don't let anybody in close.
Yeah. I think for me, it was abandonment, and I think it's a combination of abandonment and, so I don't know if it was, I don't remember them. I have the slide deck, but I don't remember them in the order he gave them. But at one point, it was like when abandonment came up, I thought about it. I was like, maybe abandonment kind of ties itself in, but I feel like I used that feeling in a good way. And so, and this is something I talk to a lot of people, but Santana and I used to have this conversation, because the abandonment and how I used to feel about certain things, that I use that energy as driving force, because I was in sports, so it was useful. But it was more so along the lines of it's special relationships. I think that's where it's a bleed into that. So where my 12-year-old very distinctly is the fact that my dad died at 12. So when he died at 12, we were just getting good, like in the sense of like, so he was a little bit more stable. He was accessible. I could see him. It was I never forget. It was like July. We had a church. My mom was she was a part of the choir in Detroit, and they were going on a trip, and I didn't want to go. So she was like, all right, you stay with your dad. So I stayed with him. At this time, we're spending all weekend together. He was like, hey, I'm just want to let you know I'm a little sick. He said, but I'll be all right. That was July. He died in December 13th. So there was only 2 Friday 13th in '96. The first Friday 13th was September. That was when Tupac died. Second one was in December when he died. So I vividly remember it.
Wow.
But it was that, like, I didn't cry for about, so I had the flu when he died. I didn't cry for a while, but then I started having that behavior issue in school. And like, I'll never forget one day, I'm just acting out. Miss Graham, gym teacher, and she just pulls me to the side and she just like, I know what's wrong with you and it's okay. Bust out crying. Like, it all came out. All of it. And no words were said after that. That was it. But it was like, I used that notion, and so I created this narrative in my head that my dad's choices was the reason why he wasn't here. And he chose, those choices were more important than me.
You. Yeah.
And so like what I did, that was everything. So it was like,
that's what you told yourself.
That's what I told myself. And so now it's like, I have to be better than him in anything. So it was like, I'm competing against a person that will never tell me job well done. And it shows it, but it shows itself up in various forms. So it transfers, because I'm seeking the approval from the father figure. So this now happens with my godfather. So my godfather and I. So it's the same thing where I realized that again, for my godfather, where I get the whole adage, or I don't do well with compliments or anything like that. It's because my godfather was very critical of my basketball game. So for me, it's like I don't look at compliments as true compliments. I'm always looking for the constructive criticisms. It's because again, my socialization is through sport. I'm trying to always get better. So I'm looking at it from that like how do I become and how do I get better at all times. So all that being said, it then now transfers over to him. So now as I'm getting older, I'm realizing that when my godmother, his wife, passes away, and when she dies, we then now realize that the bond that we had between, in terms of like godfather, godson, isn't as strong as we thought it was. Like the real connective glue was my godmother. So it's like I can't now. It's now starting to come back full circle with him in terms of, as he's gotten older, he's kind of realized some things where it's like maybe this alienation of some sorts, maybe he had some doing to it, and so he's gotten a lot better at reaching out. I've gotten a lot better of allowing him, because at first it was like once I felt that, it was a matter of me now turning this thing into like, all right, well now I gotta prove him wrong too, and I don't need him in that regard. And so like that was the thing where, again, this is all stemmed from the 12-year-old who felt that way about my dad.
Right.
So, and again, it comes up, the whole aspect of, hey, having a conversation and saying, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And if I hear an automatic no, if I don't hear a no, if I don't hear a perceived yes, I'm automatically taking it as slight, or I'm automatically taking it as this. And so it's like, now I'm like, all right, let me go back and do that work and dig out those roots that are still there and toss them out. So.
Yeah. So finishing off on one, I'm sorry to hear about your father.
Oh.
I mean, I never known, and we've obviously it's never come up. So, do you find that's changed the way that you're parenting?
Yeah, 100%. But it's also it's and it's funny. I was having a conversation with my cousin about it too. So it's there's this in our family. The pedigree is a real thing, in a sense, like prestige and pedigree, and like that's important. But that's another reason why I didn't name him John. I named him Langston. There's a connotation to Langston and why he's named Langston, but it's to also give him his own path in that regard. So his path is not directly tied to me. It's tied to whatever he decides he wants to do. That is, I feel like there is, in some ways, I guess the way I use my abandonment or the special relationship angst towards my father, in some ways I fulfilled what he didn't do, but that wasn't my responsibility to fulfill the things that he didn't do.
Yeah.
In that regard. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like that's not a useful tactic to use in terms of like harnessing motivation for me. So it's like I'm definitely laying that down.
Right.
And so I think it's also my fondness to reading Eastern philosophy, more so Buddhism, that has allowed me to kind of really see like it's not a practical use of energy in that regard. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. It's not funny, but the wound that I have with my father just recently resurfaced, probably about 2 weeks ago, and he'd come here to visit for my niece's birthday, and we had kind of find this common ground of our relationship after so many years of just this uneasy, like it's just never really worked. It's always been strained. It's always been different. He started a new family, but I posted a picture of him, and the picture basically said that, my relationship with my father has gone from abandonment, betrayal to now acceptance. And that it's just such a beautiful relationship. And I was really at peace with where we were because I was able to understand how he shows his love.
Yeah.
Was not how I wanted him to, but I needed to accept how he thought he needed to show love.
Right.
And so I guess somebody had shown him the post. And he fought really, really hard with me against the two words betrayal and abandonment, because he felt like the definition of those words did not identify what he did, but yet I lived it.
Right.
And so that's recently resurfaced, and it's like just a whole other vortex of like what we talked about at Conscious Conversations with this wound of, you know, there's things that our parents do that they have no idea that they do, and it's like, just own it, just accept it, and just say, if that's how I made you feel, I'm sorry.
Right.
You know, like,
no, yeah.
Obviously, if you knew that you were doing it, you wouldn't have done it, so you didn't do it maliciously.
Right.
But just the simple accepting, you know, my father and I had an argument, and it was like, those two words that you used hurt me. Mm. I said, I'm sorry that they hurt you, but I lived it, so it hurt me a lot more. And it just didn't get it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what's going to happen there, but, you know.
Hopefully it works itself. I'd probably give it some time.
Yeah.
Cool it off a little bit. I think, but it is one of those things where I've even thought about that from the perspective of my father and my mom. Like, my mom did the best she could. My dad did the best he could. But at the same time, it's also, I have to understand that they're limited too. I'm fortunate because I live in a time frame where I have information at my fingertips, literally, whereas they didn't. So my parents are should my dad be alive? Obviously, my father is old enough to have. My mother was older than integration, so like my mom's lived and experienced life very differently than I have, and I understand that. So it's there's part of me that also has that grace to give my dead father the grace to understand he only knew what he only knew. Yeah. Same thing for my mom. She only knows what she only knows. And I have to accept if she's not going to meet me where I am, or not necessarily, we're just gonna have to, agree to disagree at times, and I just have to be okay with it there. Which, from my mom's perspective, my mom and I, it's easy for me to do that because the way my mom and our dynamic is. I mean, I love my mother dearly, but one of the biggest complaints that my mom had to my father was that my father was a mama's boy, and anytime that he was needed or to be bailed out or anything like that, my grandmother would just save the day for him in that regard. Whereas that caused tension between those two, and then more importantly, my mom and my grandmother. She vowed that I wouldn't be that way. I'm not. But then there is a little bit of what you get is what you get in that regard, because I don't have that. I have that mother-son adulation, but I'm not a mama's boy. And I think that sometimes she would prefer it now that I was a little bit more mom or mom-centric in that regard. And it's because like she would say, we used to have those conversations, and she would say, you could call me more. I'd be like, all right, I'll call you more. But then it was like, Mom, you can just call me. I'm not doing too much, just call me. But so it was her always. She wanted me to pursue and chase her in that regard. Always give her that call, which I kind of understand. But it was also one of those things where it was like I kind of don't understand it, because it was this thing like, again, she would make reference to my father being a mother's boy in that regard, and so it was like, well, I'm not that. So you kind of got what you intended on in that regard. So it's kind of like, which one do you want?
Right.
So, but it still doesn't take nothing away in terms of, again, like I said, she did what was best for all of us at the time, because I'm the youngest, and so for me, it's one of those things where it's like, again, she had 3 grown kids. We're all thriving. We're all doing well. So I have to sometimes remind her that, because when she gets on me about the most minuscule thing, I'm like, Mom, you did your job. You still don't have to parent me in that capacity. I'm an adult. So, but I understand, once a parent, always a parent. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's dive in a little bit. So your relationship with Santana has evolved.
Yeah.
Tremendously.
say so.
Yeah. So let's unpack that, and I'll let you do the honors because I'll mess up.
You're triple over that one. So again, throughout the earlier portion of the podcast, I know you referenced and you used the language of was lesbian, in heterosexual, all those jazz. But if I was to tell you, Santana, if you were to have a conversation with her right now, she'd tell you I'm a lesbian. That's who she is. So one of the things that this is actually a callback, but like maybe like early when we were dating, she would always say, "Hey, what if I wanted to have a girl?" And I said, all right, I would just have to think about that and consider. She's like, "That's the wrong answer." And I told her, I said, maybe in 5 years we'll be revisiting this conversation. Last year this past year just happened was that 5th year, and I brought that back up to her because for me, I was like, this is something that humans are creatures of habit. You're not going for 28 years of your life. You're not going to just be orienteering just to women and just be like, you know what, that guy John, he did it. He changed it. That's not the case. So for me, it was one of those things where it's like I've had a very long time to think about this in this regard. So what I'm alluding to is that Santana and I have been, since May of 2019, we've been in an open marriage. Well, ethical non-monogamous in that regard. So we just...
Say that again?
Ethical non-monogamy. So it's ethical non-monogamy, polyamory, open marriage, however, and those three are interchangeable in some capacities. But, there is clinical definitions if you break them down in some capacities. But for us, we've taken the rule of monogamy out of the relationship, but the commitment and everything still stands.
Yeah.
So, that's been one of those things where, the nuances and trying to make sure that our communication. So what that has forced us to do now is be very intentional in our communication, which it's actually a great thing. Because it's not like we had bad communication, but then there was a point during the Depression that when she became a little bit more standoffish, she was kind of closed in, and so when she came out of that, we're able to still have these real conversations, and when we actually kind of stole a little bit of the circle of trust thing from Will Smith and the Red Table Talk, or their family when they kind of hold hands and kind of like, I'm going to say this and speak freely along those lines. We've taken some of that, but for the most part is having the dialogue, because we have to make sure that we're on the same exact page as we're moving towards this. So it's not a big work in progress. Yeah, it's a big work in progress.
Yeah,
because it's the nuances. There's certain things along those lines where we actually define it's a very interesting thing because we define integral stages of connection differently. So it's like I'm an extrovert, so more than likely I would meet a person out. She's an introvert. She has at one point set up online dating profiles. So it's like we have these conversations like, hey, how would you go about it, or how would you go about it? And so it's more me asking her from her perspective, because like, how would you go about it? So it's not like we don't have that over the shoulder. I'm looking at your phone. I'm looking at you. Look at your phone. Like we don't do all that. Like if she wanted my phone, I'd hand it to her, and she knows the passcode. It's not. It's that type. So it's not. I'm not the helicopter husband, like looking at her, and her nuance, and her like. But I would be curious, how would you go about that? Like I could be interested because I know how she is from an interpersonal perspective. It'd be interesting to see like how are you going to go about that? So
yeah, it seems like you guys are doing it very much different. This is a completely different subject matter for Western civilization,
right?
I think all of civilization except for some different religions. It's almost like you're figuring it out as you're going along, and you're kind of creating the rule book as you're doing it, because one, she's a lesbian, you're heterosexual, so she is searching for another lady. You are not, I don't want to say you're searching for, I don't want to say that about her either, but you guys are okay with the opportunity of a woman coming into both of your lives.
Right.
Which is very, very different than just, we've had several conversations about Aubrey Marcus and his ex-fiance. They were poly, so they could hook up with, obviously they were heterosexual, so Aubrey would hook up with any girls that he wanted. She would hook up with any guys that she wanted.
Right.
So I think your dynamic is a little
different.
Different.
Yeah.
But in a good way. Does it make you nervous? Because there is an aspect of playing with fire.
Sure. But that could be on both sides too.
For sure.
So it's kind of like, I guess, but when you say nervous, I don't want to say nervous in the sense of that regard, because nervous makes me feel as if though nervous would be a bad adjective to use. And the reason why I say that is because I'm not nervous of the idea of her finding herself in that regard. So it's like I look at it from a selfish perspective. And my selfish perspective is this: whatever we need to do to get Santana an optimal Santana that benefits Langston and myself and her, go do that. So whatever that looks like, find that. Because again, it's the whole notion and understanding that happiness is our own individual responsibility. It's not my job to make Santana happy. It's not Santana's job to make me happy in that regard. So I can't fear her being authentic, because that's what drove me to her anyways.
Yeah.
Like I've seen her in relationships with other women. I was like, oh, they're a dope couple. Like I was a fan of her then. And as much as I'm a fan of her now, as being her husband.
Yeah.
In that regard.
Yeah, I guess nervous was the wrong word for it, but it's hard to have a conversation about this because you want to speak correctly. Like you don't want to say something that's out of line or out of context. But this is good because it's very challenging to. And I say challenging, meaning like it's challenging your mind to think something different than what you were ingrained to think about, which is great because it just expands the conversation. And so I'm always into having these kind of conversations. And so it's good that you say, you don't think nervous is the good adjective.
Just nervous probably wouldn't be the one. If anything, I'd be intrigued, but again, I still wouldn't, because I think that the bond that Santana and I still have, like that's still there. So I think that that's something that I don't foresee that, and that's not the bond because we have a child. I'm talking about the bond that we have because we do our genuine love and connection with each other. I don't think that could be compromised in any way. But at the same time, if there is a way that she begins to live more in her authentic manner, why would I suppress that?
Yeah.
And so and then for me, it's obviously it's one of those things where it's, there has to be a commonality of, it's kind of what's good for the goose is what's good for the gander. I mean, that's a saying that I've always heard growing up and never really understood it, but I get it in that aspect. So for us, it was like, all right, yeah, sure. You have whatever you have going on your end. I have whatever I have going on my end, and we can talk about it. In the sense of like once we get, some progressive comforts, and as we're continuing to build the plane while flying it. So,
right.
I mean, we don't get me wrong. We have the structure and everything in that regard. But I can give you a case in point. I went to. So we had a conversation about inception of knowing, and I like to call it that because. So for Santana, she would like to know if I meet a person when I meet them, because she knows how I am as a person. So certain people or to get my attention and for me to go at you, I must be impressed by a person, because I'm usually the laid back. I'm the guy who will spark a conversation with a young lady and just beeline and leave it. Like, oh, I have a good day. Don't ask for the number. Don't ask for the clothes. Don't ask for no. Just bounce. And then just have her look like, oh, wait. And then like that whole game. But I'm very, very rarely I would just go straight for it. Like I guess it was kind of like my hunting style, quote unquote, is very different. Whereas like for Santana, I was just adamantly at her, shooting my shot, hitting her up, shooting my shot. So, and she knows that. She's like, John's not. I'm not a direct person unless he really feels the need to be direct. So when that comes, or if that ever is the case, she wants to know immediately. Whereas I was looking at it from the perspective of, I was like, well, I could do that, but I feel like that's a waste of giving you information, because what if that person doesn't pan out to be anything more than just a conversation, a maybe exchange, and that was that. Versus with her, I'm like, hey, just give me the heads up, because her method might be different than mine. Whereas if her method is she's going to go the online route, or she does it from a different perspective, which I don't have the privy to be on. I mean, I have the privy if I wanted to set up a profile, but that's kind of weird if I set up a profile on any dating site that she's using, because she's more likely going to be on a dating site if she uses a dating site. Let me put that preference out there. If she were to use a dating website, it's probably going to be more towards the LGBTQ community. So I wouldn't be there in that regard. So it's like, for me, it was like, all right, well, just should you create a profile, just give me a heads up. Let me help you with your profile. Let me see what your pictures look like. I try to slice a little humor in there from time to time, just to kind of cut some of the edge off in that regard. So
yeah.
But yeah, it's I think that was a very healthy exercise that we did. What define knowing, define certain aspects. How does that look like? What do you want to know? What don't you want to know in those regards? So all that's been worked out, and then they probably will evolve as things progress in that regard as well too. So,
got it. So, do you have you dated anybody?
Nah, I haven't.
You haven't?
No.
Has she?
No, I don't think so. Now, again, at that part, I don't know, and it's not like a matter of me, like I haven't directly asked her, but it's part of me wants to see her open up to me in that regard. So like I don't want to, like, part of me doesn't want to
force it.
Yeah, I don't want to force it. Part of me wants her to just forthrightly tell me not, and I don't want to pry it out.
So I met somebody.
Yeah, I'd like to be like, yo, so I'm like, oh, okay. So versus me, I'm a blabbermouth. Anyways, like I'm again, she's the introvert, I'm the extrovert. I'm ready for the people engagement. So she's not so much. So if she were to meet somebody, she'd say, if it feel like, oh, okay, cool. So tell me more, tell me that. So, but yeah.
Have you thought about what it is if you do find somebody else? What that would look like? What that would turn into?
I don't know. I think that it's based on the intentions.
Yeah.
So if we're
like a one night thing, or
the best analogy I give is, let's say if I'm a 15-story building, Langston and Santana have full key card access to 1 through 15th floor. Now, whatever young lady. First, I have to be respectful in understanding that not everybody's going to be down, because, most women should feel as if though they should be first pick in the draft.
Yeah.
So I 100% understand that.
Yeah.
If should a woman want to acquiesce and be okay with it, it's on her choosing. But she has to understand there is only a certain level that you're getting. You're not getting 1 through 15. Depends on how we meet and whatever type of situation that she may have going on. That may be 1 through 5. That may be 1 through 10. There might be 1 through 8. It just all depends in that regard. So I think it's very nuanced as to what the encounter is.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's one of those things where I totally understand. I'm the outlier in this regard, and so it was kind of weird. I was telling Santana, like, because I was so narrative driven. And I was so narrative driven. So for me, I've always been like, how do I best articulate this? And so, like, obviously, when I brought this up, I used open relationship, I use ethical non-monogamy, and I use polyamory. I use 3 different terms to say one thing, because I'm still conscious of the narrative of making sure that I'm representing it right. Not in the sense of representing it right in terms of the broad spectrum of what it is, but then make sure I'm representing it right between what Santana and I have established. So I had to get over that part, but a nice little ride on Magic Mushroom Train helped me get rid of all that, and I was just like, own me. This is my name is John. I am married. My wife and I practice ethical non-monogamy. That's it. And just sit in silence. And then when the question's in, then it's like, oh, I can answer that question for you. This is this, and this is this. This is what it is. This is what it is. I will say, though, the young lady I did meet, nothing happened, but I did have a conversation, and she was not cool with it. Because she was not cool with it until she seen Santana. And I was like, wait, so what are you saying here? It was just kind of weird because she was like, so you trying to tell me that? I was like, yeah, we're this is allowed, this is the rules we have. So she's like, so I'm the guinea pig. If you want to call yourself that, I'm not, whatever. But then she was like, well, let me see your wife. So showed a picture of her. She was like, oh. So then her whole demeanor changed. Then I was like, well, wait a minute now. You're interested in her or me? So it was just funny how it all just switched on it as well.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like, again, just being aware and ready for the conversations. I think that's the main thing that I've been trying to do a better job of. One, learning about the polyamorous, ethical, non-monogamous, open relationship communities. And because technically they fall into a subcategory of the LGBTQ communities. So it's it's been interesting kind of like just doing reading research on it, reading how, how people are amongst them, and how how other people figure things out. It's interesting. So I just want to make sure have enough knowledge to represent or talk about it in the collective as a whole, but then obviously the collective as a whole doesn't necessarily represent what Santana and I are. So it's having enough information to give people, hey, this is what this is. If you want more, point you to some resources. But this is how we frame it in how Santana and I work it. So
yeah, it's beautiful. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about you, professional life. You are highly experienced, very well. Like your line of sight is your angles and how you shoot behind the camera is fucking incredible.
I appreciate it, man.
But so you have stepped into, probably in the last year, I think, full-time, like all in. I think that's what you said. In the last year, you've really honed in on black and white, your lines, like how it is that you want to shoot, and you've really kind of stepped into who it is that you want to be known as, which is an incredible photographer.
Yeah.
And it's been really great to see. I've been watching it for the last 7-8 months, but how is that going?
It's going well. I recently shot with a couple, and the young lady actually, come to find out, she had a background in photography, and she gave me tremendous game about like just the nuance of the business of photography that I had no idea. And it was like I like super appreciative of it, because it was one of those things where she didn't. I've been trying to get the knowledge she gave me. I've been trying to get this for a long time from other photographers, but other photographers weren't giving it to me. They were giving it to me in rations, where she just laid it out like this is how you do this, do this, do this, do this, just off from a business perspective, from terms of like, creating some systems, creating some as you and I have had these marketing conversations where it's like you're creating that very tangible early entry product or something that you can give. And she said, when you start looking at it from that perspective, then things will change for you. And I was like, oh, so like that was my homework all this weekend, which is like looking like everything that she gave me. I was just like researching it, signing up for some stuff, and just like really like trying to craft and figure how I'm going to now put that into my photography business. So. And now it's even to the point now where I'm actually now thinking about blending and merging the skill sets, because obviously the day job is digital marketing, and then the night job is the photography in terms of how do I best. There has to be a way I can create some type of synergy packet where I can go to say, hey, small business A, you need a refresh on your website. You can use this, and I can shoot these photos for you. Commission me. So I'm about 90% there. So it's like, I think, and that was very, that was all this weekend what I've been doing. Like between, hanging out with Langston, just like, that idea, writing it down, write this down. But yeah, for the most part, I've honed in. A buddy of mine told me, he said at 10,000 photos, you'll start to realize who you are as a photographer. And he was right, because I'm now realizing this is what I can do this, but I really want to do this.
Yeah.
So I should only focus on what I really want to do.
And what's that?
Black and white photography.
Yeah.
I want to be the black and white guy.
Does it make you cringe when I ask for the photos that you took of me in color?
No, it doesn't. Because part of me will also have to. I'll always shoot in color, just to have to continue to sharpen that saw. But I think what I probably will start doing now is playing with color on different focal points. So if you were to ever hit me with hey, I got some ideas, want to do X, Y, and Z. All right, bet. I'm only going to bring one lens, and I'm going to have to force myself to be creative. So I have to nail shots. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, all right, focus, hone this in, and really challenge myself to make the photo what we're trying to do in that regard. Mm-hmm. Which is, I've came up with some ideas that I can do. So I won't be like full-fledged, like out of the color photography game forever.
Yeah.
But in terms of like what I want people to book and come see me for, I want people to come see me because they're hanging these pictures that I'm taking them up above their fireplace and their mantle. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what's next? What's next for John Kornegay?
Oh, next. Well, what is next is continue to stay in the present, while accepting that I'm always learning. And so even obviously we in having this conversation, I may sound as if though I have a lot of knowledge or life experience in things of that nature, but I'm still learning on this journey. And I think that's the best part. I think in the last 24 hours or so, I've come up with my own epiphanies just by sitting and just really thinking about some things, about certain things I could do better in terms of my interpersonal relationship with Santana, and how can that be better, or how do I best figure myself out and realize that these are ancillary triggers that 12-year-old John hasn't dealt with yet, or he's missing these that adult John's missing, and it's 12-year-old John talking to adult John in this regard. So it's that it's that thing. So for me it's the constant checks and balances of evolution, and I want to make sure that I'm always presently aware of myself to know that as much as I do know, I know nothing. And so I think I like that state. I like the state of always learning and being open to the fact of I'm forever a student. So it's kind of like, it's funny, on Facebook I wrote I'm the student and the teacher at the same time, because I like that philosophy in that regard, because it's one of those things where I don't get too stuck in understanding and knowing that I'm this, which I have. Again, as I spoke before, and saying I know my overt triggers. Right. But for me to now see that these hidden triggers pop up every now and then, I still got room to grow. So I know that's the student side that still say, okay, well let's go ahead and learn from these triggers, and how can we best adapt these so I don't inflict these triggers on someone else. And then, we have the wound battle game here now. So right. I'd rather be holding the mirror than holding the trigger, the box of wounds or the gun. The gun, so. Yeah.
Yeah. And work as the day job.
The day job, yeah. Digital marketer. It's fun. I do all the making sure your websites. If you got any questions on SEO, techno SEO, Google Analytics, Facebook ads, all that jazz, I know how to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. So
yeah, I'd like some help in that area.
I got you.
Cool, man. You got anything else you want to say?
No, I really appreciate you having me. Again, I feel like this is, again, like 7-8 months in the making, especially after the first time we shot.
Yeah.
And then it was like, yeah, it was, because you're the first person who knew from the Run Club or about Santana and I.
Right.
So
I remember you telling me.
Yeah, so it was like you were the first person, and then you put me on to the podcast. I listened to that all the way up to New York.
The Aubrey Marcus.
Aubrey Marcus, yeah. So that was pretty dope. I gleaned some really interesting concepts from their relationship and how because again
that was their breakup. That was their breakup podcast
Yeah.
with him and Whitney, right?
Yeah,
Is that her name? Whitney.
I think it was, yeah. So that was interesting in that regard. But no, I mean, have me back. Maybe we can talk about something else. I feel like we touched a lot. It would be interesting to revisit. See where we are in our own journeys and talks about how we even heal these wounds that we both have, or in terms of where our interpersonal lives lead themselves in terms of you talked about dating. Obviously, myself and Santana, as we're progressing in our new normal. It's actually funny. When we had a YouTube channel together, and we called ourselves the New Normal Life, and it was just it's ironic that was the name that we decided to coin and use, but because now we are truly embarking on something that is a new normal for her and I, but at the same time, even for like our close friends or family in that regard, they're probably like, oh, because again, not a lot of people really know a lot unless you really like have the in-depth conversation with one of us in that regard.
Yeah.
Which but neither one of us are like running from it per se, but it's one of those things where it's like, you ask, we tell, but we're not like holding the billboard up like, hey, y'all.
Not until this podcast airs.
And this podcast airs, then it's a different story.
Yeah,
it's like
not until it hits YouTube.
Right. So, but other than that, I just think you're doing a fantastic job with these.
Thanks, man.
I would, maybe you got to have like another, round table, the next one with the next guys, multiple guys, just to make sure I'm in there too.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah.
I know. That conversation with five guys just literally
it was
blossomed. But the one I want to do next is a conversation with 5 girls. I want to do with 5 women, and I'm not sure who I want or how I want it to kind of play out, but I really want to try because navigating that conversation with the 5 guys. I've talked about this on the podcast before of just how nervous I was. Like I was, and it wasn't that I was nervous about recording a podcast, but I didn't know how I was going to be able to navigate the conversation amongst 4 other men in an appropriate manner that the listener was going to be able to gain. And I mean, that one, I still have people that hit me up about it. Right. And so I want to do it and really honor the feminine.
Right. I was going to say, and I'm really big on, I would love for that. I would, again, you've seen it in my photography, obviously. You can look at my Instagram is my photography feed for that. Even, we had a conversation, like and it kind of leads itself into it, where it's, one of my best friends hit me up. And so, obviously, I've shot 3 boudoir or boudoir-esque shoots. First one was a young lady named Ashley. Second was a boudoir. I shot with a boudoir photographer as my model in Kim, and the third was Santana. And my friend hit me up and was like, "Yo, man, what are you doing?" He's like, "Yeah, what's going on?" So he was giving me like all the shit about. He said, "You got Santana. What y'all doing?" And I was like, "Did you read the caption?" He was like, "Yeah." And I was like, well, "That's what we're doing." He was like, "But you got your lady all out in this jazz, and I couldn't be me, man." I'm like, "I get it, 100% get it." I said, but, with all due respect, if I was, if Santana had on a nun's outfit on or she had on, she was fully clothed head to toe, whatever illicit reaction of that in terms of like the attraction, that doesn't leave. People are still attracted to Santana one way or the other. So I was like, plus it was Santana's idea. I said, that's the free spirit that Santana, like that was like when she came with the idea, I was like, you want to do it? She's like, yeah. So I'm like, yes, let's celebrate that. Get out here. You look amazing.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I've never, and that's also like on the low been a trigger for me too in some capacities, where it's like dealing with being in relationships where women feel as if though they're suffocated. Because even I'm thinking about this now, like the girlfriend I had in college, she lost herself within the identity of being my girlfriend, opposed to being who she was in her own person. And so like that was something, and it was like one of those things where it's like I never told her that she had to be this person. Like you can be you. Like that's how we develop. And it was kind of like not me righting a wrong, so to speak, with Santana, but it's one of those things where it's like, no, I don't want you to, whatever idea that you've created with your own self of how you're supposed to be towards me, throw that shit in the trash. Like I pursued you, I married you as you are. That's who I want.
Right.
You know, the other version that you've created, you can trash. You can toss that, or you can keep whatever you think is useful and trash the stuff that just doesn't fit. And it's that where it's, you know, I would never extinguish any type of creativity or fire that comes from Santana. So by her saying, "Hey, yeah, let's do this shoot," let's do it.
All
so
in.
It was like, but it's one of those things where it's like I wouldn't be surprised, but it is interesting to you know, again, once you see divine feminine, that energy flourish and fire out, it's kind of like not everybody is going to be able to handle that in that regard, and you realize that as people in their own journeys, and you kind of hear them talk, and you're like, oh, maybe you're okay. I see what perspective you lean from, which is 100% cool. If you're not there, you're not there. So
Right.
yeah, but no, I say all that to say I'm definitely for the all ladies podcast. You know, it might be one of those things where you just set the table, you give them you just give it up and be like, hey, I'm just bop bop bop.
I'm gonna moderate, and just help guide you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, and I have an idea of kind of who I want it to be, but yeah, I definitely want more women on the podcast. Mm-hmm. It has been male dominant. But you know, you are whom you spend your time with, and so a lot of friends have been on that are obviously males. So, but there's a couple ladies that are lined up that are getting ready to come on. So I'm excited for it. So, well, as we wrap up, why don't you go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you?
Oh man, website johnkornegay.com, www.johnkornegay.com, Instagram @johnkornegay. JOHNKORNEGAY. Again, I don't have one of those fancy schmancy names, so you know I'm very plain Jane. You know,
Same.
John Kornegay. That's where you find me at.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, I appreciate you taking time to chat with us and let us into the glimpse of your life. I'm sure this is going to open up a lot of people's eyes. Yeah. I think it's going to really intrigue a lot of the listeners because this is new and this isn't very normal.
Yeah.
But it's also beautiful. Yeah. And so I think it's amazing to kind of be able to be on the forefront of it and really help champion what it is that you two are doing, because you're also raising a human. You're raising a child while you're trying to make sure that you stay true to who yourselves are, right. You know, both you and Santana. So I think that's incredible, and I think it's beautiful, and I commend the both of you for being able to do it in such an honorable and just a pure, just raw human way.
Yeah.
So
the journey is the journey is definitely one that I'm looking forward to in that regard. So again, because I just see, I look at it more so from the sense of the re-blooming of Santana along those lines, and I see it like it's those flashes of brilliance that you see. It's really starting to kind of pick up, and she's kind of getting those sea legs to it. And so like when I would say back in the day, like when we had our own YouTube, like she really is like the star of the show. Like I'm just the boom mic guy. Like she's the shit. I'm nothing really in comparison to like when you get the two of us together. Like she's the real personality. But she just, you know, slowly but surely, but you're gonna bloom back out here, and then y'all gonna be like, oh, okay, I see what this is. So
that's awesome.
I'm the one who married up.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Cool. Well, I appreciate everybody staying in tune, and if you made it this far, what I'd love for you to do is wherever you listen to your podcast, preferably on iTunes, go ahead and leave me a comment, leave me a 5-star rating. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you're enjoying the podcast. Let me know if you have any suggestions. Hit me up on the gram at Patrick Moen or Just a Recording Pod. With that being said, thanks for tuning in, and peace.
All right.